Mexico's new president under pressure. President Claudia Sheinbaum finds herself navigating an impossible position as she attempts to balance American demands for expanded cooperation against Mexican cartels while protecting the national sovereignty that defines her political party's core identity and public support base. Her administration faces relentless pressure from Washington to authorize American military operations on Mexican territory, while simultaneously confronting domestic political forces that view any accommodation of foreign intervention as betrayal of Mexico's hard-won independence from outside interference. The delicate equilibrium she must maintain has become increasingly unstable as American intelligence operations expand and military preparations accelerate, forcing her to make decisions that could determine whether Mexico maintains its sovereignty or becomes the theater for America's next military intervention. Sheinbaum's policy approach represents a calculated departure from her predecessor Andrés Manuel López Obrador's strategy of avoiding direct confrontation with cartel organizations through social programs and negotiated truces that many critics viewed as capitulation to criminal control. Her administration has implemented what officials describe as a more aggressive stance toward cartel operations, including increased military deployments and high-profile arrests of cartel leadership figures that signal a willingness to engage in direct confrontation with criminal organizations. However, these policy changes have produced mixed results, as violence levels have actually increased in several regions where government forces have challenged cartel territorial control, leading to criticism that her approach has destabilized existing arrangements without achieving meaningful security improvements. The domestic political pressures confronting Sheinbaum's administration have intensified dramatically as Mexican citizens demand both protection from cartel violence and defense against American military intervention, threats that many view as equally dangerous to Mexican national interests. Public opinion polls consistently show that while Mexicans want their government to address cartel violence more effectively, they overwhelmingly oppose allowing American military forces to operate on Mexican territory under any circumstances. Her Morena party faces internal divisions between factions that favor expanded cooperation with American anti-cartel efforts and traditionalists who view any accommodation of foreign military presence as political suicide that would destroy the party's nationalist credentials. Military deployment strategies implemented by Sheinbaum's government have emphasized repositioning National Guard units and regular military forces to regions where cartel violence has reached critical levels. But these deployments have achieved limited success in reducing overall violence while creating new tensions with American intelligence operations. The National Guard, which was transferred to military control just before López Obrador left office, now operates in coordination with regular Army units in joint operations that target cartel infrastructure and leadership positions. However, these operations have sometimes interfered with American intelligence gathering activities, creating friction between Mexican forces and CIA operatives who require operational space for their surveillance and targeting missions. The diplomatic balancing act Sheinbaum must perform has become increasingly complex as she attempts to provide sufficient cooperation to prevent American military intervention while maintaining enough independence to preserve Mexican sovereignty and domestic political support. Her administration has established private communication channels with American officials that allow for coordination on specific operations while maintaining public positions that emphasize Mexican independence and rejection of foreign intervention. These private negotiations have produced tactical agreements that allow American intelligence operations to continue in exchange for advanced notification of major military movements and shared intelligence on cartel activities that pose immediate threats to Mexican security. Specific agreements regarding CIA operations and intelligence sharing have evolved into complex arrangements that officially limit American activities while providing unofficial accommodation for expanded surveillance and targeting operations. Sheinbaum's administration has formally protested American drone flights over Mexican territory while privately establishing protocols that allow such operations to continue with reduced visibility and minimal public acknowledgement. Intelligence sharing agreements now provide American agencies with access. to Mexican military intelligence on cartel operations while restricting the flow of sensitive information that could compromise Mexican security operations or reveal the extent of cooperation between the two governments. Anti-cartel operations conducted by Sheinbaum's government have produced significant arrests and seizures that demonstrate enhanced cooperation with American intelligence while maintaining the appearance of independent Mexican law enforcement action. Her administration has captured several high-value cartel targets whose locations were identified through American intelligence operations, including the arrest of 3 major cartel leaders in January 2025 that resulted from coordinated surveillance efforts. However, these successes have also triggered increased cartel violence as criminal organizations respond to government pressure by escalating attacks against civilian populations and government forces, creating a cycle of violence that undermines the political benefits of cooperation with American operations. Economic pressures facing Mexico have fundamentally influenced Sheinbaum's approach to cooperation with American anti-cartel efforts, as her government recognizes that trade relationships worth hundreds of billions of dollars depend on maintaining acceptable levels of cooperation with American security demands. The threat of American tariffs and trade restrictions has created powerful incentives for accommodation even when such cooperation conflicts with Mexican sovereignty principles and domestic political preferences. Her administration has calculated that limited cooperation with American intelligence operations represents a necessary compromise to prevent more damaging economic consequences that could result from complete non-cooperation with American anti-cartel efforts. Historical Mexican sovereignty concerns rooted in centuries of foreign intervention have shaped Sheinbaum's approach as she attempts to provide cooperation that satisfies American demands without triggering nationalist backlash that could destabilize her government and Mexican democracy. Mexico's historical experience with American military interventions, including the 1847 invasion that resulted in the loss of half of Mexico's territory and the 1916 Pershing expedition that pursued Pancho Villa across the border, creates powerful political and emotional resistance to any accommodation of foreign military presence. Sheinbaum has stated that Mexico would categorically reject any unilateral U.S. military action in Mexico, emphasizing that such action would not resolve anything, while proposing constitutional reforms aimed at strengthening protections for Mexican national sovereignty. Private negotiations between Mexican and American officials have focused on establishing limits for American military intervention that could allow for targeted operations while preventing full-scale military occupation that would trigger complete breakdown of bilateral relationships. These discussions have explored scenarios where American military action could occur with minimal Mexican government involvement, including possibilities for American forces to conduct operations in remote regions with minimal Mexican presence or to target specific cartel leaders whose elimination would benefit Mexican security interests. However, these negotiations have also revealed fundamental disagreements about the scope and duration of any American military operations, with Mexican officials insisting on strict limitations that American planners view as inadequate for achieving meaningful disruption of cartel operations. Despite these diplomatic efforts, the pressure facing Sheinbaum's administration continues to intensify as American military preparations accelerate beyond the point where accommodation may satisfy Washington's demands for decisive action. The military options on the table. Pentagon planners have developed 3 primary military strategies for operations against Mexican cartels that range from limited targeted strikes to comprehensive campaigns designed to systematically dismantle cartel infrastructure across multiple Mexican states. The first strategy focuses on precision elimination of high-value targets through drone strikes and special operations raids that would decapitate cartel leadership while minimizing broader military engagement. The second approach involves sustained air campaigns against cartel production facilities, training camps, and logistical networks that would cripple their operational capabilities without requiring significant ground forces. The third strategy encompasses comprehensive military operations that would establish temporary operational zones in cartel-controlled territories where American forces could conduct extended counterinsurgency operations similar to those employed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Drone strike capabilities being developed specifically for cartel leadership elimination utilize the same MQ-9 Reaper platforms that have conducted targeted killings across multiple continents, but with modifications designed for operations in Mexico's diverse terrain and urban environments. These drones carry Hellfire missiles with reduced explosive yields to minimize civilian casualties in densely populated areas where cartel leaders often operate, while maintaining sufficient lethality to eliminate targets in fortified compounds. Targeting procedures require multiple intelligence confirmations of target identity and location, with kill chains that can be executed within minutes of receiving actionable intelligence on high-value cartel leaders whose movements are being tracked through extensive surveillance networks. The drone program has established forward operating bases in Texas and Arizona that position aircraft within striking distance of cartel territories in northern Mexico, while mobile command centers can direct operations from locations that provide optimal communication links with surveillance assets and targeting intelligence. Operational planners have identified over 200 potential targets, including cartel leaders, operational commanders, and technical specialists, whose elimination could significantly disrupt trafficking operations. The targeting process requires confirmation through multiple intelligence sources, including signals intelligence, human sources, and visual identification before strikes can be authorized, with particular emphasis on avoiding civilian casualties that could generate political backlash. Special Forces raid options have been developed for urban Mexican environments, where cartel leaders maintain fortified compounds that require ground assault capabilities rather than air strikes that might cause excessive collateral damage. These operations would utilize Navy SEAL teams, Army Delta Force units, and specialized CIA paramilitary officers who possess experience conducting similar raids in hostile urban environments across multiple theaters. The raids would be conducted primarily at night using helicopters that can insert and extract teams rapidly while avoiding extended ground engagement with cartel forces or Mexican military units that might respond to incursions. Planning for urban raids recognizes that cartel compounds often include civilian populations, including family members and coerced workers, who must be protected during operations, requiring specialized training and equipment designed for precision operations in complex environments. Teams would employ advanced night vision systems, breaching charges calibrated for specific building types common in Mexico, and non-lethal weapons for controlling civilian populations during operations. Intelligence packages for each potential raid include detailed floor plans of target compounds, identification of civilian areas to be avoided, and escape routes that minimize contact with local security forces. Rules of engagement being developed address civilian casualty concerns by establishing strict protocols for target identification and verification that exceed standards typically applied in conventional warfare environments. Military personnel would be required to positively identify targets as cartel combatants rather than civilians before engaging, with particular protections for women, children, and elderly individuals who might be present in operational areas. The rules also establish procedures for handling Mexican military or police forces who might interfere with operations, emphasizing de-escalation and avoidance rather than confrontation with Mexican government forces. These engagement rules recognize that cartel operations often occur in civilian areas, including residential neighborhoods, commercial districts, and agricultural regions, where distinguishing combatants from non-combatants requires extensive training and sophisticated identification procedures. Military personnel would receive specialized training on Mexican civilian clothing, cultural practices, and behavioral patterns that could help identify legitimate targets, while avoiding mistakes that could escalate conflicts or generate international criticism. Intelligence requirements for successful operations include real-time surveillance capabilities that can track target movements, identify security arrangements around cartel facilities, and provide advance warning of Mexican government responses that could interfere with operations. Current capability gaps include insufficient human intelligence sources within cartel organizations and limited ability to monitor cartel communications that increasingly use encrypted messaging systems. Military planners have identified needs for enhanced signals intelligence capabilities and expanded recruitment of human sources who can provide actionable intelligence on cartel leadership locations and operational planning. Timeline considerations for different operations range from immediate drone strikes that could be executed within hours of target identification to complex special forces raids that require weeks of preparation and intelligence gathering. Military planners have developed flexible timelines that allow for rapid response to time-sensitive targets while maintaining capabilities for sustained operations that could continue for months depending on political authorization and operational effectiveness. Contingency planning addresses scenarios where Mexican authorities attempt to interfere with American operations through diplomatic protests, economic retaliation, or direct military intervention to protect their sovereignty. Cartel retaliation scenarios include increased attacks against American citizens in Mexico, escalated drug trafficking operations, and potential terrorist attacks against American targets. Military planners have developed response protocols for each scenario, including procedures for protecting American citizens and interests while maintaining operational momentum. Military leaders consider targeted drone strikes against cartel leadership the most viable option for immediate implementation because they require minimal resources, can be conducted with existing capabilities, and offer the greatest chance of achieving meaningful disruption of cartel operations while minimizing political and diplomatic complications that broader military operations would create. However, these operational plans have been developed based on intelligence assessments that may have significantly underestimated the military capabilities that cartel organizations have acquired over years of territorial expansion and arms accumulation.